Oh man, I'm excited for today's show. I think it's about time that we connect this. We're gonna blaze right in. I'm just gonna introduce people willy-nilly. We got Kim McKinley coming in from UTOPIA Fiber for at least a few more weeks. Welcome back.
I am still here and I'm excited to be here. Let's celebrate this Friday afternoon with some broadband chatter.
Yes, indeed. We got a lot to talk about. Doug Dawson from CCG Consulting from Asheville, where the charter cable finally works. It only took a devastating natural disaster. Welcome back.
Yes, indeed. And it's 80 degrees to get today, and I still don't have any water in my house to take a bath with. So,
oh man,
so that's a good thing. This is virtual.
You don't have water still?
We have water, but not water that you can touch. Yes. So we have water for flushing. Yes. Probably Christmas.
Yeah, that's wow, Christmas. Okay. That's hard. Travis Carter from USI Fiber in Minneapolis, where he's got all the water you could ever need right out his back.
Yeah. I must have missed an episode because wow, is this fancy? A new intro, new logo.
Oh, you did miss it.
Yeah.
If you snooze, you lose, Travis. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's
you missed the 100th episode of all of the episodes to miss. You missed the 100th episode.
Well, I mean, we spent half a year building up to it.
What's that?
We spent half a year building up to it. I can't believe you just skipped it.
I know. This day job sucks. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a number of things. We're going to bring on special guest Matt Peterson in about a half hour. I'm super excited because there's been an election. The pixie dust is out. Pixie dust is out. And even though the economy will have all the same indicators in January, it will be great. It will be an amazing economy doing great things for America, even though it will look the exact same as it does right now. So we have that to look forward to. For show titles today, I was thinking about either Go Elon Go or Nice Knowing You, BEAD. So these are topics we'll be discussing as we think about what the Trump administration might look like and what the impacts will be. We're gonna be hitting on that. And Travis is going to be trying to get me to get all red-faced and blustery. But we are going to try and talk about BEAD some as well. And I'd like to talk about labor a little bit and what we're expecting to see with labor. I feel like there's a number of interesting things that have been happening there that we haven't really talked about. So let's jump in. The Trump administration is coming back. Actually, that reminds me, related to some of this, we have a bet. And so I would like to know when do you think the bromance between Elon Musk and Trump will end? So this is our first chicken wing bet of this new cycle. Kim, what do you think?
I don't think it will last. I think it won't last until the end of 2025. I'm thinking, let's say November 1st of 2025 is my bet.
Okay. Travis, what do you got?
It won't. All 4 years will be solid, the relationship.
All right. Doug?
June of 2025.
Oh, Doug is going in hot.
I was looking at that. I'm going to say,
you used to watch Prices Right. You got to bracket this.
Yeah, no, now you got me. You've hit me right in the middle, so I have to go short or long on you, Doug. So I'm going to say May.
Ooh.
Yeah, I
think
he
just $1 betted you. He just $1 betted you.
Yeah,
I did.
May?
I did.
Yeah, what were they all now again? Just so we're clear.
I got May. Doug got June. I think Rise got writing this down or taking note of it. Kim has December, I believe. Is that what you said?
November.
And then
I have the rest.
Yeah, you have the rest.
You have half the rest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Other question is, and I think this is one Travis more wanted to bring up. I mean, I was surprised to read yesterday in the financial press that the Federal Reserve is already slowing down the rate at which it is decreasing the federal funds rate to lower the interest rates, because they have expectations that we're going to see inflation kick up significantly. I saw Wall Street sort of pricing in higher inflation out of expectations of the way Trump will run things. And so there's a question, I don't know exactly how we do this, but I think there's a bet about where the interest rates are in some period of time in the future. And so I wonder if we jump to 2026 around this time, where do we see interest rates?
You're saying the Fed borrowing rate?
Yeah, the Fed borrowing rate, which
today is at what, 5 now?
You're the one that keeps track of it, so
Yeah.
I just know if it's going up or down by your mood.
Well, because every quarter point is hundreds of more happy subscribers that get hooked up, right? So
it's real. That's why we're talking about it. I mean, it's very important.
I think we see a full, we'll use their terms, 100 basis point reduction during the first year of the Trump administration.
Okay.
Yeah, but what is it in 2026? That was the bet. Like
So in 2 years, what do you think?
At the end of 2026?
Do you want to just keep it to 1 year? I think 2 years is where I really want to see it, because I think there'll be more impact then.
Boy, that's really hard to predict. It's I guess I would prefer to wait and see what happens in year one. Let's see.
Pull
Mitchell
and listen to your heart, not your head, so that you can be fully crushed in the future.
This is a bet.
Mitchell came in hot today.
You have to climb out on a limb.
Well, see, because I'm conflicted. The borrower in me wants the rates lower. The investor in me wants them higher. So this is where it's like you and your CenturyLink stock. I mean, you don't want it to be good, but it's not bad. So I'll go 150 basis points.
Down.
Lower or higher?
Down.
Yeah. Doug?
A point higher than today. 100 basis points higher than
That's
today.
what I was going to say. Kim?
I was going to say the
We're
same
baby.
of where we are today.
Okay, I'm gonna kneecap you again, Doug, and say 75 basis points up.
We're staying consistent.
Whoever loses or whoever wins, the other three buy them chicken wings. I'm not really sure what the victory is here. Or
that one's gonna be probably more bragging rights, I guess. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's be fair. I'm jobless. I'm not buying you chicken wings, Travis.
Yeah.
By then, Kim will be the only one working. All right. So where do people want to start? There's a lot of things to predict. I have some more hyperactive ones that'll, and some smaller ones. But Doug, why don't you kick it off? What do you want to say?
Three areas are FCC direction, wireless, and BEAD, right? That's three biggies.
Those are three that I had.
Yeah. So let's talk about BEAD. That's an interesting one. I talked to some folks today, deep in the big programs, and they say that there's a fairly strong rumor that there will be some clawback. And if that doesn't happen, they fully expect a manipulation of the rules to make them easier for ISPs.
Which is to say that of the $42.5 billion, not all of it will go for broadband is the expectation there.
Well, also to relax a lot of the rules because it's really, really tough rules with the letter of credit and all that stuff that they might get rid of a bunch of that stuff. So, so that's two different thoughts. The clawback is a little bit scary in that they could, the rumor there is not that anyone's after BEAD, but that they're after all of the infrastructure because that's Biden's big crowning glory, and they might want to take some of that.
Oh yeah, the energy money's gone. Like, I mean, I can't imagine that it all gets spent the way it was intended.
Right.
So that's.
But in doing that, if they do it with an axe, then BEAD could be a go with everything else, not on purpose. So I don't think they're out to get BEAD, but it could happen. I'm more inclined to think that there's enough pressure in Congress to try to keep that. I mean, so many politicians benefit from these grants, but who knows?
Other thoughts on BEAD? Kim, we'll go to you next.
I think that it's going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to get clawed back on the broadband. I don't, but I'm like Travis on this. I see both sides. I could see it going. I could see it not, but I'm going to predict that they're not. But with this when you have a Republican held presidency, Senate, and House, then I could also see something really radically changing depending on where Trump wants to go with his fiscal policies on this. So I don't know. I think it's up in the air, but I do think some money is going to go out from the people I've talked to in the House and the Senate. But I do think that they are going to change the rules behind the BEAD funding pretty significantly.
And which I did say, and if they do that, that means big delay. They got to start all sorts of stuff over again. Yeah. So.
BEAD.
Maybe.
Is this the one where they like 4 years ago talked about hooking people up in rural areas that didn't have broadband?
Yes.
How many are hooked up today?
Yes, it's still 0.
Oh, it's 0. Oh, we're still at 0. Oh, after all this time, 0.
It takes a long time to transfer that much cash to CostQuest to develop the maps, which I think is mostly going over in the form of cash and wheelbarrows. It takes a while.
Well, if you read the WISP forums and the success that Starlink is having in rural communities, I think there'll be an argument for people to maybe reduce the regulations and maybe shrink that coverage requirement that you're obligated to fill, because when you get out further, the cost goes through the roof. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see BEAD go away and get replaced with something else.
Ooh, but that's a good question. The Starlink thing. Do we think that the rules will change to allow Starlink?
It's impossible for me to imagine that some BEAD dollars don't go to Starlink.
Well, first of all, it was already changed to allow that. So that's already happened.
I don't think there was. So it's up to the states, though, still, I think, then, right? Yeah. I mean,
it's up to the states to ask for it, but a bunch of them already have. So, yes.
And let's be clear, when BEAD was first announced, Starlink was in its infancy and not that great. But I've probably got a dozen friends that use it 24/7, and it's a very good technology. And they're literally they live out there between nowhere and nothing. I mean,
I think Starlink. No, I mean, when
Starlink was out there, is that Arkansas?
Yeah, no, but it has gotten exponentially better in the last.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. The speed tests have actually gone down from what I've seen. And then there were wait lists, and now their wait lists are gone again. I mean, it sort of goes back and forth. I don't think it's been.
I mean, there's capacity planning on any network. I mean, that's just normal,
right? But I think the first, when it first launched, it had more problems in terms of intermittent losses because of not having enough satellites in the air. But now I think the issue is more one of congestion, typically for people, and I think they had faster speeds when they had fewer customers.
Actually, I look at the detailed speed tests, and there's a lot of times where people are getting 300 and 400 megabits, and there's times when they're getting 25. It's still I think it's a congestion issue locally, is what I think.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is something that
one just final comment on that. It's an Earth station problem. It's all the regulatory requirements, the environmental studies, and everything to build the Earth stations that are required.
And the actual frequency to use them.
Yeah.
They don't have
well, I mean, it's just, it takes them, I mean, they can launch, 40, 50 satellites at a time, and it'll take them a year to get permit approval to build a ground station.
But if you also, I mean, I'll just throw out there that there's a reason that permitting requirement exists. And I think if you look at what Elon Musk's, and I should say more specifically SpaceX, has done around with this kind of garbage that they're just throwing around and leaving everywhere in the Brownsville area, you need to have those regulations, or else this company just trashes the places it's in, it looks like.
And there's one more issue there. One more issue there, because just like if you in the wireless world, an airport is a wireless dead hole. There's so many different frequencies used, nobody else can do anything. Those Earth stations kind of do the same thing, and so you don't want them in your neighborhood from a frequency perspective. So it's an interesting challenge where the heck to put them. So
I mean, the issue that I have, the larger issue, and I wrote about this on LinkedIn, it got a massive hookup, and then you know that you've done something when you get a ton of people reading comments who didn't bother to read the 6 paragraphs that you wrote. They're just responding to the title or other people's comments. But the issue that I have is, and I think we're gonna find out, but once he hits 60,000 satellites, I think that's the target. It's not clear to me what the capacity is within the United States, but it seems clear to me that he's able to serve several million households, perhaps even more. And there's many more locations than that need service simultaneously. And it's not clear to me that you can achieve that with 60,000. And when you have to relaunch and replenish that constantly with 20% or deorbiting every year, I think it's not clear to me that we'll find that we can actually sustain those number of launches without significant environmental degradation. And so like, I actually think that people are acting like Starlink is all figured out when we're only starting to get a sense of what it's capable of and what its limits are, not just in terms of the engineering of the satellites, but actually getting them in place.
Well, and Singapore is going to put up 30,000, the state of Singapore. So, I mean, there's a lot more satellites coming. So,
Oh yeah. Well, and remember now with Starship becoming a viability, the larger version 2 Starlink satellites will become available, and that'll be a whole nother.
Yeah, but that's just going to be a bigger issue of the amount of, what is it? Is it aluminum oxide? I forget exactly what it is in the upper atmosphere as these things re-enter. There's just like no one studied this stuff. And what's interesting,
they're going to change. They're going to change that. The Japanese just launched a bunch of wooden satellites. I think they're going to find a solution to the aluminum problem. So,
okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying that it's become a very viable alternative.
Yeah, no, it has. But like here again, I would just come back to, I feel like there is this sense of like, it works for a number of people. Everyone can use it. It's not clear to me. So if you look at satellite-map.space right now, I think is the URL, you can see all of the satellites up there. And if there's 6,000, if you like think about like, okay, over a given state, how many are there right now that you could see from within a state like Iowa? There's probably between 0 and 5 over the state of Iowa right now. And you increase that to say, okay, there's 50 satellites. All right, 50 satellites, each one connecting what simultaneously 3,000 or 4,000 subscribers, maybe more over time. That's not covering all the rural locations of Iowa, not even close. And so like, I don't understand the math of people. We're getting back into the simple thing of like mobile cellular wireless where people are like, it can serve anyone. Yes, but that's not the same as serving everyone.
Is this the 5G of our 2024? Is that what we're talking about? Basically is a 5G solution and that everybody thinks it's going to fix it. It's a faceted solution that's really going to connect these people.
But I'm here for it. Like, I think let's do it. Like I'm less money going to AT&T and Charter, who says they're now sitting it out for like BEAD. I'm cool with it. Give it to Elon. I don't care anymore. Like, let's run the experiment and prove me wrong. I'd be happy to see it.
No. My point is this is only for the most extreme connectivity situations.
That's not what the policymakers in DC are saying.
Well, I had the question this morning. Is Starlink a competitor for your fiber product? Absolutely not.
No,
absolutely not.
But even if you're trying to get to like, I mean, if you're talking about the extreme, we have to define, is that 1%? Is it 5%? And in between there, I think is where Starlink can serve.
Don't we have a map for that? I thought we have a map for
Travis,
that.
I sent you the contract. You and I can bid on it. Okay.
Well, okay, I didn't understand that though. Is all those costs, you add all those things up to get to the $140 million in mapping costs, or is it? I don't know how that works on that government website.
Yeah, no, we'd have to look at it more deeply, and I don't think this is the time.
It's a lot of money, so we should have a map to figure that out. Okay.
So I understand that, speaking of BEAD, there's two things that I find interesting. One is some people, particularly political appointees, will want to say, pedal to the metal, let's get stuff out as fast as we can. At the same time, you have people who are saying, I'm out of here. My understanding is people have already submitted notice at NTIA, and they're getting the heck out of Dodge where they can still get jobs that are available, because presumably there's going to be a bunch of people looking for possibly a dwindling number of jobs building and working in this industry, from a policy point of view. And then you have other people who are saying, I'm going to slow everything down because I want the next boss to really like me, and the next boss wants to slow things down. And so I'm curious to see how much NTIA can get done over the next several months.
This is what happens at every change of every administration. It was going to even happen if this would have happened to some degree if it stayed Democratic. It happens at every.
To some degree, there's a difference between like speeding and murder as like terms of capital offenses. Like, both are crimes. Like, I think there's a real.
But a lot of folks have already turned in their notices. You're correct. So yes.
So it's going to be fascinating to see. NTIA wants to get the capacity and the competitive grants out for Digital Equity Act this year still. They're trying to rush ahead with BEAD, presumably. with a dwindling number of people, and we all had doubts about their ability to move rapidly before. They're behind on the TBCP, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. I assume the tribes will probably get screwed. Trump hates the tribes. He doesn't like their gaming casinos and whatnot, and loves taking their land away. So, like, I feel like some of the things that I really like are really gonna get screwed, and I'm disappointed in that.
Travis, I hope that he could get at least one rant better than that.
No,
Yeah.
I found out he had lunch. We really messed up here. We should have done this about an hour earlier.
Blood sugar, yeah, it's our enemy.
So one other thing that I mean, so Doug, you mentioned Spectrum. I want to come to that next. But one of the things I do want to mention is that, like, most of the analysts I see are still acting like rule of law is a thing. And I think it'll be interesting to see how this goes differently in telecommunications. But the Supreme Court told Trump he has immunity effectively for what he does. The man has already pardoned a ton of people who committed crimes for him. And he's going to be telling people, basically, do what I want, and I will pardon you for any federal crimes, and no one can stop me from doing it. I really don't think rule of law is a thing anymore for a number of issues. It's not to say that everything's going to go out the window, but I think people are assuming way too much is going to be like it used to be. Kim?
So I was just going to ask, I'm just like, did you vote for Trump or no? Just asking.
I'll tell you that I did not vote for the Kennedy guy.
Okay, fair enough.
Chris made an interesting statement there. And I think he's basing this on the fact that the way it was is what has been an effective, good way.
Not good,
No.
Predictable. For industry, they want predictable. And I think they're about to find out how unpredictable things can be.
Did you check your CenturyLink stock today? It's through the roof.
Travis, I am worried about you at the 55 years in your memory. I don't know how many shows I need to tell you that I'm out, but I'm out. I have a garage now. Remember, you helped me connect it
into Comcast. Yeah. I see the way is with BEAD, and ineffective as it is, and zero customers hooked up. Why would we want it to be the same?
Oh, I'm not making the case for it to be the same.
Okay,
and Travis, I don't know, like, you could go back and look at more than 100 shows in which I'm complaining and arguing that things should be different. So there's no doubt that I'm not the status quo guy. My point is
this show has not been nice to BEAD. No.
Doug is making comments about how, like, oh, well, they can't just claw it all back. And I'm like, why not? Who's going to stop them exactly? Like, if they decide, no, we're not going to write those checks. Like, I don't know exactly, like, it's up to them. It is up to whoever is running NTIA. And so when we find out who's in charge of the Department of Commerce and NTIA, we'll find out whether we win the lottery of having an agency that behaves more or less like it has since the Roosevelt administration, or whether we get one of the new ones of the new world.
Can we do a bet now?
Yeah.
Will the Trump administration hook up more customers through the BEAD program than the Biden administration did?
Okay, this is an unfair bet.
Okay, let's be clear about this though. Like this is the sort of thing that I love, right? Because, like, Travis is like being all comic and, like, throwing it back in my face. Trump had 4 years of infrastructure weeks and couldn't get any money aside.
Whoa.
So the Biden administration gets money out there, gets money out through a number of different programs that get people connected, is actually doing all this work. And the Trump administration is going to take the money that it could not get Congress to do because it was incompetent, and they might actually connect a few people. And Travis is going to say, see, they're so good.
Did I mention 6 gigahertz yet on the show? That we got.
So this is Spectrum. Let's talk about Spectrum. What are our expectations around Spectrum? Because Travis, I don't think we're going to see a repeat.
Skip over that there, young Mr. Yes, we got juicy. We have results in the first Trump administration. We have 0 customers hooked up in the second administration.
No, 0 BEAD customers. There was a number of programs that hooked up a lot of people.
There's a lot of people hooked up.
What were those? Well, there's been a ton of tribes that are building networks.
Yeah,
rescue plan,
ton of money in ARPA and CPF. Yes.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, billions of dollars of connections.
And Doug, were those good programs?
Yes, yes, they were, because ARPA, the counties, cities, and states just gave it out directly, and CPF had almost no rules. That was $20 billion. They just built stuff with it.
If people want to go back, the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund was originally going to be a bureaucratic mess I worked, I would say I was a junior partner to the National League of Cities, Next Century Cities, and others who worked to reform the rules to make them much better and make them what they are. A bunch of mayors came together, and the Biden administration listened and made the program really good. I don't want to talk about Spectrum. We're going to run out of time, and I want to talk about Spectrum.
Why did they take a different tactic with BEAD then, do you think?
Because Congress demanded that Congress demanded, wrote all this stuff. And then now people are like, why is the Biden administration following the law? Because that's what they were doing. Now, could they have done it a little bit differently? Yes. And I think they should have, but Congress gave them a mess and the Biden administration said, we're going to do a mess. Like, that's what happened.
Kim, Doug, I'm trying my best. He's not taking it though.
You are.
I want to talk Spectrum.
Let's talk about
Spectrum. Let's go to Spectrum.
I'm almost out of tricks, so he better blow soon.
Okay. Spectrum is, I believe that they'll very quickly give the FCC the ability to auction Spectrum again. So that, and Congress took that away. I think that'll come straight back.
Now, why is that going to be important, Doug?
That's important because it moves along the ability to put out new bands of Spectrum, because we have to move people off of other. The way Spectrum works is you take whoever's using it today, move them somewhere else, and then you auction it off to the big companies. And this is going to be very much having an auction. Now, there is a counterbalance to that, is because there's also going to be a gigantic tug of war between Elon Musk and the cellular carriers. Now, he may be willing to buy at the auction because they're going to be, and you hate to turn down billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's going to be a very interesting tug of war.
Cruz is not going to turn down billions of dollars.
Exactly. And so that's my last point. As much as you say Trump will make up the rules, there are senators and they have very strong opinions on these kind of issues. So a lot's going to happen, but it's going to be a compromise between all the different perspectives.
There's going
to be a lot of changes. Yeah.
This could be the first big fight, because one of the first things that Republicans need to do is to figure out the budget, because they want to extend the tax cuts for the rich. And to do that, they need to figure out where they're going to find money. Finding money through Spectrum auctions is something that they're going to be focused on. So there will be no more unlicensed Spectrum, not as long as Cruz and Trump are running things. Cruz is the head of the Commerce Committee. He cares a lot about this. And so I would expect to see Spectrums and them trying to free up Spectrum. There's not a lot in the short term, but there's going to be a big pressure to find any money they can.
They could even come back and snag 6 gigahertz.
That's what I'm hoping for. Oh man, like I want that personally.
It's very good Spectrum.
I can just start just shouting at Travis about it every show. Every show will have a new intro, which will be about the reclawing of 6 gigahertz. So, but I don't think that's going to happen. That would be a terrible idea. That would be a good idea only so that I could win on Travis for one time, but that's not a good enough reason to do it.
But it's worth a lot of money.
Hold on. Will the 6 gigahertz Spectrum be clawed back under the second Trump administration?
I'd say at least some portion of it, yes, is my bet. So
I'm going to say no, because no matter what, I'm an optimist, and I really hope it's not.
Oh crap! I can't agree with Chris.
I want to know if Kim has any thoughts on Spectrum.
I just love this fight that's happening, and I actually don't have any thoughts on this right now. After you guys, what else do I say after you all have spoken? You've basically said it all.
I think the Trump FCC is going to be so effective under Mr. Carr that they're actually going to do what they need to do and increase the power output that is allowed in the 6 gigahertz spectrum. To make
do you really think that? Do you really think that, though?
To make it, I have to choose something, and otherwise I'll be betting with Chris. So.
Okay.
and he's like 100%. He's 0-10, so I can't bet against that.
I want to talk about labor quick. Actually, one other thing. This is not an argument so much, but does anyone know who pays for? So Cox is suing Rhode Island. Doug's predicted other lawsuits. Who pays for the state lawsuit?
I have no idea. I have to think that the state does.
Yes. And then the states are not happy about this.
No, not at all.
And apparently the states are.
Well, what'll happen is the governor's going to tell the broadband office to completely cave on the lawsuit and agree to whatever the lawsuit is. Like, you watch, that's the only way out of it. So
I'm curious to see what happens there. So on labor issues, first of all, some of this, it's impossible to talk about where we're going without making an assumption about whether or not there are significant numbers of deportations. significantly changes the labor across the entire country, not just the sector. But where are we right now? Because there's a bunch of talk about workforce development. And my understanding is that as of right now, there are not a lot of jobs doing this work. Travis, is that your sense before Doug goes? Or Doug, you want to go first?
Yeah. Right now there is a little bit of excess labor force, but if you look, if nothing changed and BEAD actually got built the way it's scheduled to be built, that's almost twice as much fiber construction in 2027 as we are currently doing. And then we're going to have the big shortage. So it's coming, but it's not here yet. But if all the money goes to satellite, it will never materialize.
That's what I'm curious about. I mean, I'm wondering whether, like, what are the odds that we actually have a significant workforce gap? And Travis, I'm curious about you, and then Kim.
So again, we're kind of a small microcosm of the situation. I don't know if this is, but since the slowdown in the housing market and new construction here, a lot of people have moved into this industry. So in 2024, we've had more labor than we can use. I don't know if that will continue or not. If interest rates come down, housing, starts kicking off again, the inverse may happen. But there's a lot of folks out there right now looking for work.
Mm-hmm. Kim?
Right.
Yeah, but I think that there's a lot of people out there, but are they good people and are they skilled people? And I think that we have to differentiate that and what you're looking at in the some of the employment shortages in this space. And I think, like, are you looking at splicing being a shortage? Are you looking at people who are deploying and like management, and what's the difference? But because I do think that you are going to have a shortage of people who've actually worked in these networks, deploying them. But the blue collar stuff, I don't think you're going to see a really big shortage, because I do think you're going to see people moving into this field. And there's a lot of entities who are working on that right now and have been for years. The Fiber Broadband Association is one, with their Optic Path program that they have to help combat these workforce issues that they saw years ago when this BEAD money first came out.
Kim, I don't want to mansplain to you how the industry works, but there's
he's going to, though.
There's people that work to build networks, and they're interchangeable, whether you're talking about network administration or inside or outside plant. It's all just workforce for networks. There's no way to think about. You're getting too nuanced for our audience, I think, and certainly for me.
Kim, you are correct.
I completely agree with Kim.
No, I mean, I think Kim raises around. I'm often thinking of outside plant, but I think Kim raises a very good point. Like, obviously, like, one of the nice things about
thank you.
one of the things about outside. Sorry, my sarcasm is often very hidden sometimes. One of the things about outside plant is you can actually fairly rapidly bring people up, but for a number of other positions, obviously, there's a lot more training and things like that one has to go through in order to try and fill that position.
This is what I've seen.
There's always been a shortage of good splicers. That's a real talent.
This is what I've been seeing. Like, I mean, I was talking to an entity yesterday that a new CEO came into the company and bought gear without understanding that it is not even capable or compatible with their system, right? Like, and then basically said to their engineering department, you have to make this work. And the engineers are like, it doesn't work. And I think you're having a lot of these people who might have management experience, but if they ever really developed a network and worked with these people, it's going to be a problem, especially in some of those ILECs that are starting to have to build and change their business model going forward.
Yeah, especially with their dozen giant mergers where those mergers are going to just kill middle management people who know what they're doing.
I mean, Bell Canada has to figure out how to translate from metric into English for XGS PON now with the Ziply acquisition. Go ahead, Travis.
No, I was going to say, and I think Reed's on here in the chat too. I think the network engineering component is probably going to be the most difficult to fill. I think that those folks are hard to find, especially good ones. Mm-hmm. And it takes a long, long time to build that skill set.
Okay. For people who haven't been listening, now is the time to tune in. If you just wanted to ignore the politics and predictions and dig into Middle Mile, we're about to bring on Matt Peterson and to talk about something that I'm not a genius on, unlike all of the previous topics in which, and not only that, I'm a great texter. Just ask Travis, who I'm sure at times throws his phone at his wife and just says, I can't deal with this guy anymore. So.
Last comment first, though. Kim Travis and I didn't do politics, just you did. So.
I'm okay with that.
Oh.
My job is to deal with power. So we're going to talk with Matt Peterson now. Matt, let me just give you a very brief second to introduce yourself to those who haven't met you at NANOG. And then after you do that, I want Travis to tell us if he knows who you are or not from the NANOG meetings and such. So welcome.
Yeah, oh, it's an honor. I guess I suppose I'm one of those people that have been in networking since it was dial-up and ISDN and T1 and DSL. I think I had DSL by high school. So yeah, I've been doing internet for a long time.
I go back to dial across. I was pre-dial up.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I skipped acoustic modems. So I think my first was 2400 baud. So I did skip that. But yeah, I wear a lot of hats. So yeah, in the footer there, SFMIX is the founder of a internet exchange in San Francisco. And then I have a consulting entity with my business partner, Tim Posar. Last name is Peterson, 2P. We're not very creative on the marketing side. We specialize mostly in service providers. We've worked with about 15 service providers in the state of California, everything from municipalities to tribal to like startup, wireless ISPs.
Travis, did you know Matt ahead of time? Did you read the bio and the?
I did. I've heard, but I think Chris. You think I go to all the NANOGs? I've actually only ever been to one. Yeah.
Oh, really?
So, well, I'm kind of lazy and I don't travel like Kim does. So
I just found my sticker today from the one you brought me to.
But I know of Matt through Jay Hankey, my buddy Jay.
Oh, awesome.
Who knows everybody in this industry. So
yeah, and this is not the only time we'll talk about middle mile, but I wanted to bring on Matt because we've had a specific conversation. This is not going to address all issues of internet exchanges and middle mile, but Matt has helped me and Rye to learn a lot, just like Jay has, among others. And we've talked a bit about what California is doing, and California has made a historic investment into middle mile. And in the course of that, Matt shared with us a number of things that he had proposed and has thought about. And this is one of those things where I still feel like we see new organizations being developed, like to do middle mile across entire states. And so I would like to talk about what a state should do. If it really wanted to create the most market competition, to allow for entry, to make more resilience, to just do all the things we'd like to see. But before we get there, I just want Matt to we're mostly gonna move on to a higher level of discussion. But for people that are a little bit newer, Matt, what is middle mile?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic. I think a lot of us understand last mile, providing retail internet service, whether it's a single family home or small business, et cetera. And on the other side, there's long haul fiber. So this is fiber that goes across counties, states, countries, into the water, out an island, back in again. So that's kind of the two sides of the spectrum. And ironically, somewhere in the middle is middle mile that doesn't have the greatest, I would say, industry acceptable sort of characteristics, if you will, that are assumed. In California, it's basically described as a open access wholesale broadband market to enable ISPs effectively statewide. So if you think about providers in smaller markets, they may only have a choice from the ILEC or the former cable company, and that's it. And so the idea is that the state will bring in sort of the big pipes, if you will, into regions that don't have a lot of choice, or the choice is very expensive or out of capacity. I mean, we still have several counties in California that are served exclusively with microwave for their POTS and T1 service. So yeah, the idea is that the backhaul, if you will, for the ISPs.
And what we've seen in California is that includes both urban and rural, although most of the miles are in the rural, which is what one would expect.
Yep.
And so I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on where we feel like California could have done better or should kind of change course. But can you just give us a sort of a brief overview of what California is attempting to do, and then how you would have encouraged them to think about it differently?
Yeah, sure. So California really focused on how do we use an asset that they already own. So they're placing fiber on state highways. Roughly every 2,500 feet, there'll be a handhole. Every 50 miles, there'll be a hut. And the idea is that ISPs would build adjacent to the highway to basically access this infrastructure. I think part of the challenge that we see, SFMIX having I guess at this point, probably 15 of the 110 ISPs in the state of California as members. I think part of the challenge that a lot of the operators have said to me is that that makes sense if you were, say, a large multinational, if you were a Lumen or an NTT, that would be the network that you would want to connect to. But as a regional provider, the vast majority of the providers in the state of California, they're not CLECs, so they're not licensed to even access the right way. They have no construction experience. And in many cases, reaching the state highway right away is not quite as difficult as a railroad crossing, but it's pretty close. It's extremely difficult to do. So just at the physical layer where they've chosen to place this fiber is really inaccessible for the vast majority of providers that need to access it. I think that's a real challenge. The other
I
one
think,
is,
sorry, if I could just break up for 1 second.
go
I mean,
for
I
it.
think this doesn't change what you said, but I think they would say that we've gone a little bit further in that they've offered to do a ring cut, and that they would, if someone could meet them at a place where they don't have a handhold, they would go there. But that doesn't change your criticism, which is that it's still not very easy for them person to approach that spot either.
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation because oftentimes the ideal situation would be to place equipment in a parcel that had, like, say, extra space for additional buildings. And in the case of California, they're placing those huts in like state roads department maintenance yards. They don't want other tenants, they don't want other entities there. You'll have to be chaperoned when you're there if you're connecting with their equipment. So it's just really unfriendly, I think, to a lot of ISPs. Again, it makes sense if you were building a multi-state network that was optimized for wholesale, carriers, that would be great. But for regional and small ISPs, it's really not accessible for them. Our recommendation was go to the de facto interconnection location within a lot of counties. I'm currently in Eureka, California, in Humboldt County, and there's one building in this entire county that has all 3 fiber providers and all the wireless providers. It happens to be a community center. And the reason for that is it used to be where they had public access TV. So it already had connectivity. And a very, entrepreneurial wireless ISP figured that out and said, oh, I'm going to start my network there because I can buy from 3 different providers and price them against each other. So that would have been the place that, MMBI could have showed up as a natural location for everyone to build access. Being on the highway, it's a lot more challenging.
I have a couple of questions I want to get to, but I want to just open it up a little bit first. So anyone else want to jump in with a question for Matt along these lines?
So Matt, just so I'm clear, so the state has built a duct system down the interstate, and then effectively anybody can get access to it?
Yeah, so they're actually putting a cable in. This is another challenge that we have is that a lot of the decisions that the state has made are not public. So a lot of this we have to get from Freedom of Information request. So they're putting a 288 count cable throughout these highways. And then the idea is that an entity would build a shadow vault. Yeah, exactly. So like a feature path or some sort of product like that. And the idea is that you as an operator would build a shadow vault next to them. You'd run a tie cable into their vault, and that's how you would access their services.
And then what, you would get an IRU for a pair back to an IX somewhere?
Well, it'd be really nice if they would publish that list of services that they're planning to sell, which they have refused to do.
Hold on. Is this a government-owned asset? Is that what we're saying? That it's difficult to work with?
I think part of the challenge is, my opening statement was middle mile doesn't have a defined definition. So, from my perspective, it is offering a very small set of services. As I was telling Rye earlier, it's the in and out model versus the McDonald's model. You have a very well-defined menu, and that's typically going to be dark fiber and lit transport services. I think another tenet is high transparency, really good governance. Most of these providers can't even get GIS files from the state, so it's hard for them to even plan, how do I build to interconnect where I don't know where the asset's going to be placed. Talked to one provider in Santa Cruz County. One side of Highway 17 is $1 million build for them. The other side is a $20,000 bill. They don't know which side the cable's going to land on that highway. So there are some real challenges, I think, in again, ISPs being able to interconnect with this. But yeah, the theory is that you connect along the highway, and then they're going to land at 3 data centers throughout the state. Again, they haven't announced those. If you zoom in on the maps, it's pretty obvious. One Wilshire in LA, the 11 Great Oaks Equinix campus in San Jose, and it looks like Tuner Paul in San Francisco. So that would be a CoreSite, Equinix, and a Digital Realty property, which makes sense. And so if the fiber goes there, then yeah, you could buy internet, or you could connect to IXPs, or some combination thereof.
Quick question. Golden State Net. So there's like multiple names that refer to different people that have different pieces of this. You're talking, the state is building the MMBI, right? The middle mile broadband infrastructure. And Golden State Net has a contract to operate that, which is about to be rebid, is up for proposals soon. Is that right?
Yeah, so the legislation is kind of interesting. The state actually has several initiatives well before BEAD was even announced. And so one of them is MMBI. And if you look at the legislation, the way it's written is pretty interesting. It effectively says that the state will outsource the development of the network to a statewide research and network educational operator. There's only one, that's CNIC in the state of California. And so they were kind of deputized, as this role of a third-party administrator is the terminology. And so CNIC has a subsidiary called Golden State Net that's wearing that hat currently. They are going out to bid for a new entity that's focused more on the operations and less on the engineering. And CNIC actually spun up yet another entity, another hat to wear for that submission. But yeah, the idea is that the state owns the asset, but the state doesn't want to operate it, doesn't want to market it. They don't want to be in charge of repairs. They want to have, third parties manage that for them.
Kim?
No, I was gonna say, because I know some of this, but I'm working at Utopia right now. But do you think, you're saying that they're not being transparent, but I think, do they even know what they are trying to accomplish right now, since the middle mile is pivoting a little bit during the deployment phase? Or do you think that they're intentionally, from your opinion, trying to hide it?
Well, I think if we look at kind of the makeup of the folks involved, it's a lot of regulators, certainly some bureaucracy. Out of about 300 people involved, whether they're consultants or they work for our telecom regulator, the CPUC, or they work for the state's IT department, CDT, I can only find one person that's ever actually worked at an ISP that would actually buy services on this type of network. So I think that's a real challenge. I was thinking about this yesterday, and it's kind of like saying, hey, we've got this really good housing developer. They make McMansions in Connecticut. 4,500 square feet is the average home, 3-car garage. They're really good at making housing. Let's drop them in Alabama. They need to do public housing, MDUs, go. Well, yeah, there's still 2x4s involved, but everything else is different, right? The go-to-market, what services that you're selling, how you attract customers, the financial model, everything is vastly different. And so I think there's kind of this naivete with the state that, well, we've got some folks that used to work at large carriers. We've got a lot of bureaucrats that want to work on this, and we've got some regulators that have some involvement. We'll just put them in the room and it will all just work out. And I think the governance is a real challenge. If they had actually kind of embedded themselves with the ISP community, I think they would be a little bit better off to know, oh yeah, if I'm on this side of the highway versus that side of the highway, or if I'm picking certain services to sell. It just seems like they're a little out of touch with what their core competency should be. We saw an example of this where after 2 years of the state interviewing various ISPs throughout the state and even some ISPs outside, they came back and did a survey and said, hey, by the way, we're thinking about selling managed firewall service or internet access. Well, that's basically competing against your customers, right? Are you Boeing, SFO, or McDonald's, right? Are you the concession operator? Do you build the planes and do you run the airport? And I think that's the challenge, is that middle mile traditionally is dark fiber and lit services, and that's it. And the state has gone around and said, well, we're thinking about doing these other things. So I think the messaging is the real challenge that we see.
So this goes back to my point, Chris, is that you don't have enough educated people who've done this before who are running these networks. And that goes into the employment shortage, is because just because you've worked at a high level at ISP, you've never been on the ground level to make some of these day-to-day decisions.
Yeah, no, and that's
Yeah.
before we jumped on, we talked about how the FCC is only for lawyers. And like, Doug, I'm going to come to you in 1 second. I just want to, I want to know, I want to remind people also, like, this is California has not done it perfectly. And like, frankly, like there's a number of things it could really improve upon. It's still done more than many other states. And I want to put that out there. I want to make sure we spend some time on what an ideal state would do. So Doug, go ahead, and then we're going to swing in that direction.
I've been working with ISPs about this network as well, and it's just very odd. For example, they recently came and said, you have to pin down your interconnection points. And this was about a week after they finally gave us a map of where the network might go. And we still have no idea what the products are. And again, how do you actually connect into these points? Because if nobody wants to connect in a place where it's behind a chain link fence and I got to pay somebody $100 an hour to babysit me, so it's great in concept, but they're liable to have one where the only people who use it are Comcast and AT&T and some wireless carriers, and that would be a real shame because that's not the intention. They did the same mistake that the state broadband offices did. Most of the state broadband offices never actually sat down with all the ISPs in a room and said, what do you think we should do since you're the one who are going to take this money? Most of them never even had that meeting in a group. And so, this is a network built for ISPs. You would kind of think that you'd want their opinion. So,
I don't know. Is it a California thing, Doug, or
no, it's not. It's a bureaucrat thing.
Because
the concept is good, and they could have come to me, you, and Matt, and we could have designed them an awesome middle mile network in 2 days that would have done all the things that it should do, but they would never listen to us because we've all worked in the street, and that's not what they're looking for. So
yeah, because I've actually never seen on any of the carrier neutral, middle mile, whatever you want to call the networks. I've never seen the serious networks use them. I've never seen Comcast CenturyLink on them. Because they have their own networks that they build.
Well, they do. I mean, it's few and far between. 100%. I agree with you, Travis. We kind of kept a list of some of the ones. Like we've seen them to get across rural counties in New York, in a number of places in Iowa. We've seen them leasing, a fiber or taking service just to expedite it. And because I was surprised at first, because I'd always been told the same thing that you just said, Travis. But then in talking to people, I found a number of examples where they had.
And there's places where they have, yeah.
Maybe way out on the fringe, but I've never seen them like they wouldn't run their core network down a government run network. Are you kidding me? Who's gonna is there an SLA? Who's gonna fix it? They change staff all the time. Like Matt said, who has the key to get into the gate? That might be a 3-day project. It
might be. UTOPIA is a government agency, and I don't think that they have any of those issues.
I'm not sure UTOPIA really is government. They kind of mask like they are, but I don't think it's really government.
Thanks, Travis. Yeah. I didn't know I had a mask on, but I get.
Take a shot at Kim Day, everyone.
Everybody do it. I get what you're saying though, because it's like, and I think that's why the big carriers do struggle with these, is that you're putting your customer experience in the hands of people are they actually going to deliver? And I think that is a thing that all the big carriers have of what happens if nobody delivers. So a lot of them still buy or put their own backbone in for a lot of these projects because of those reasons. So
yeah,
I don't think you're wrong.
All the electric utilities do the same thing, which I find entertaining because Travis is like, I wouldn't use a government network. All the electric utilities are like, I would never use AT&T. Are you kidding? And so there's a number of different ways to react to to these sort of feelings. And that's not to say they're invalid. It's just that it's.
Which means we end up with a rural county that has a middle mile network no one's using. The electric company has their own. The cable company has their own. And the telcos have their own. And none of them connect each other. That's the reality of the world we have.
That's Matt's nightmare.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
But isn't that human nature? You want to control your at the end of the day, the way I look at it, I'm going to get yelled at by the customer. And if there's a piece in the puzzle that I don't control, talk to my buddy Jay when there's a fiber cut.
Yeah.
And the phone's ringing off the hook and you can't get an answer to get it fixed. It's not a good day.
100%. Matt, you want to respond to any of that before I throw another question your way?
Yeah, sure. I would definitely agree that these middle mile networks, they're not designed or really marketed towards incumbent carriers. So yeah, cable companies or ILECs, that they're never going to use these networks. Oftentimes their cellular entities will. So like NovaNet out of Washington definitely has cellular carriers using that network. Maybe not directly, ironically, maybe with a PUD in the middle that's servicing them. But that's pretty common. I would say that service providers are always dependent on each other a lot, right? So I'm pretty sure that Travis is not pumping out Broadcom ASICs. You probably don't manufacture your own cable. You don't build your own trailers. You probably don't even have to build your own curriculum. As Kim was saying earlier, FBA and other associations have educational materials. So we're always dependent on other people to provide our service. Ultimately, at the end of the day. I think it's it's like a risk mitigation. The hardest challenge I see is a lot of wireless ISPs is growing out of that mindset of I need to have fiber, in the yard. I need to have a trailer. I need to have a more professional operation because most wireless ISPs, their return on investment is measured in months or weeks, where fiber is obviously years or decades. And so I think it's important to note that there is a subset of service providers that could really benefit from middle mile, but certainly the super high end ones, probably not. As was stated earlier, utilities don't trust each other. Yeah, power companies famously build their own fiber or microwave and don't buy from the traditional carriers and vice versa.
Although, let's be clear about this. Part of the reason they probably do it is because many of them are on cost plus regulated, return. So like they get money by building their own, and they don't actually have to like talk to their investors about delaying profits to them because they're investing in a new fiber line. So there's important considerations with some of these.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely regulations that push them in that direction. But yeah, I agree with Doug's earlier comments that a lot of these middle mile networks could have done better outreach or could have had better governance going forward. And that's a real challenge with a lot of internet communities. This is like a classic problem. I think my concern is if other states adopt what California is doing or model after California, that'll be really sad. Because oftentimes California could be a real innovator and do good things for other states in the world. Not all the time, but if other folks copy this approach, that's going to be really worrisome because it's not ideal.
Okay, so let's talk about what is ideal. Although I want to first say one other thing, which is that we're all imagining they should reach out to us to talk to us, not me. But if they reached out to me, I would be like, you should talk to these 4 fine people here on the side of the screen. But they're also going to reach out to like the dum-dums that we would all say they shouldn't listen to. And so there is a little bit of a challenge in terms of they probably did reach out to people who told them this was the best way. But we're going to leave California behind and we're going to imagine the state of Schmalifornia. And in this state, they are trying to figure out what is the ideal way to move forward. So, Matt, you've described what's happening. Give us a sense of what would be different if this state listened to you and built the network the way you recommended.
Well, I think one of the tenets that hasn't really been thrown around is the idea of a non-discriminatory network. Oftentimes we say open access, and open access is selling the same set of services regardless if it's a large international incumbent or a mom and pop wireless ISP. But by my definition, non-discriminatory means that you're not building the network architecture to a specific customer demographic. And I think that's part of the challenge that we see with the current network is that it assumes a certain caliber of provider that can consume it. So in this more ideal world, it would be exposing that network in easier to reach locations. So again, community centers, county buildings, traditional communication sites, a Crown Castle, American Tower site, an existing data center. There's plenty of other locations that would be a lot more accessible to a variety of ISPs than that high barrier to entry along the highway right away. I think the other thing that would be more idealized is that the governance of that network would be highly maintained and guided by its customer base. And that's ironically kind of segueing into the next topic. Internet exchanges, for the most part, are governed, built, operated by their customer base. And so it'd be really nice is if MMBI in this alternative world had at least like a customer advisory committee or some real power for their customer base, because as taxpayers we're all paying for this, but we have really no input mechanism, and the customer base doesn't either. So I think that's something that could be helped. And then finally, yeah, the applicability I think would be more ideal. So again, we talked about these huts. A lot of ISPs are just like, hey, if you could just slap a monopole there, or if I could get 4 RU of space, if I could just put a little bit of equipment there, that could be really useful for my network. And MMBI has been very clear, like, that's our space. We're not designing it to sublet it. We're not going to put a tower or monopole. You got to figure that out yourself. So I think really just lowering the barrier to entry would have been huge. And then, yeah, related to the next topic, building a statewide network that goes back to the urban corridors to get internet is nice, and it will lower cost. But it also makes, I like to say, kind of the blast radius a lot bigger. The more and more circuits that we draw out of One Wilshire or Great Oaks, the more and more dependency we have on these locations. And if there's ever a natural disaster or other issues, we've built this statewide network that's dependent on 1 or 2 sites throughout the state. So if there are other places to do interconnection, ironically to adjacent states like Oregon or Nevada that are also building networks, that would be really, really useful too, is to improve the routing or underlying resiliency.
And we
Travis?
have an example of someone
We're
who's
done.
done it well. Thor Network in Colorado did this, and their goal was to create resiliency because the only networks were the star networks you just talked about that all were from CenturyLink, and they all started in Denver. And so they had outages very regularly for days and sometimes weeks. Hospitals would go down, and so they built this network strictly to make resiliency, and it works. And they make it incredibly easy for any public-private partnership to get on. So check that one out on the internet. These guys did it exactly right. So,
And it wasn't as expensive as you might think. I
no,
mean,
it was not.
MMBI
It was
is
not.
MMBI is multi-billion. Thor was
Yes.
like 40 million, I think. Like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it covers about a fourth of the state. I mean, so it's a really nice network for that part of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Kim or Travis?
Go for it, Travis.
Fundamentally, I really like the idea. I've always thought the ideal situation was to use the interstate right-of-ways to build backbones across the state, and then either drop in internet exchanges periodically around the state so that smaller ISPs, especially in their upstart phase, could utilize it, because that's the hardest part, is getting those first few thousand customers on board, because you just don't have enough capital to build your own network, and there's rarely networks that are available for you to utilize. The only problem I ever had with it is having the state run it. I mean, if you could have a independent group that ran it, that was easy to work with, and you could easily onboard and offboard new connections. And to Matt's point, the handhole wasn't in the right of way in the interstate. They actually brought it up into an area you could actually get to it. Or I always thought it'd be a great idea, but the irony is, I think these networks are already built for the state in most cases. They're just using it for the state's use, and they can't, and private entities are not allowed to use it. So I'm not even sure you'd have to reinvent or dig a lot, because as far as I know, there's like in Minnesota, we have Minnesota networks all over the state, into all these areas that people are begging for capacity that can't get it. The library has it in their town, but nobody else has it. It's kind of
it's not allowed to be used for commercial.
And it's not allowed to be used.
This is one of the things that we actually we were going to push hard for the next Harris administration, or for the first Harris administration, to open those up, to break those silos, and try to do a big campaign to make people aware that we had fiber available when we were just choosing not to use it. That campaign is not worth pursuing at this point, so we're not planning on that anymore.
I don't know, Matt. I had this other weird idea. What if you use the post offices as your not IXs but interconnect points for small operators? Because every little town has one, and if you put a little cabinet right on a post office property and you tie it into the fiber that was already there from the government, I mean, you could build a relatively inexpensive network that could be used, again, by specifically those new entrants into the market that need connectivity, that just can't get it.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea. I mean, particularly if there was additional space to put another cabinet or there
Yeah.
was a monopole or something. Yeah, like you said, for these startup ISPs to originate their network or make it easier to interconnect. I think those locations already exist. At least in California, there are kind of de facto locations pretty much in every county or in adjacent counties. And so I think those exist, but yeah, they're encumbered oftentimes. And a lot of times when states or municipalities build networks, they'll get, say, conduit space from like a Comcast, and the contract will state, well, you can't sell retail services on
Yeah.
this, et cetera. So there are reasons why some of those networks are encumbered. But yeah, it is very challenging to try to like lower that barrier of entry, but also make it, cost effective. It's
Kim?
not easy.
I was just going to say, do you think that this, in your opinion, Matt, that this is going to be a useful project in California, or do you think that it's all going to go to waste?
I think it's probably going to go to waste at the current trajectory. And we have a couple different layers of this. So some of our rural counties have said, well, me too, me too. And so we have rural counties that are building an open access last mile network, which is really interesting. To be fair, I'm big fans of both of these. Conceptually, I think I agree with Travis and others that like opening up the market and making it easier for new entrants is really important. But yeah, we have some rural counties that are now saying, hey, this middle mile fiber is going to show up. We don't have a diverse enough ISP community in our region. We should build an open access last mile network. And I think that the challenge there is that for an open access last mile network to be successful, it needs ISPs that already operate in that region. And that's a real challenge to market or have field techs. I got to drive 8 hours away to service someone. I don't want to service that region. And so we have a lot of projects that I think sound really good on paper, but the practicality is really challenging. We haven't really seen open access last mile successful in rural environments. Obviously very successful in Salt Lake, but not.
I mean, we do, but to be fair, we have a lot of rural environments that we're in, but we also have the ecosystem to be able to take care of it. And I think what you said is one of the biggest points is that people think that if you do an open access last mile network in some of these rural areas, that providers will just show up. And
Right.
unless you like have a model like UTOPIA that we will take care of some of those like some of those like day-to-day things for some of our ISPs, then this new entrants won't come to those areas if they're that rural with 200 customers, right? But a lot of people don't know that. They just think if you build a last mile open access network, that you'll get any ISP out there. And a lot of these ISPs aren't big ISPs and don't have the workforce like Comcast and Spectrum and others.
Yeah, but I would also just note that, and Matt, you can reply, obviously, but Chelan and Grant counties are two of the oldest open access networks. They are quite rural, not replicable very much outside of the state of Washington, frankly, and particularly when they were built due to the power sales on the wholesale market to California for specific reasons that are I think largely beyond us. But I just wanted to make sure there's a little bit of context, because I think like there have been some successes, although I think there's asterisks by them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Kim that like having that local ecosystem or providing it as part of the value add is really important. And, we're seeing this in other industries. If you look at airports, a modern airport, a terminal or a gate is not dedicated to one carrier. It's going to be Southwest for 6 hours, and it's going to be United. This is totally normal everywhere outside the U.S. But it's still kind of a holdover that we still have in our marketplace. So yeah, I think if there's an ecosystem that can exist by bringing providers in the region or maybe providing field services as kind of a bundled deal, that can make it work. But it is really challenging. But again, totally in support of these type of networks. I think conceptually they make a lot of sense. It's just the current way that MMBI is rolling out just seems really challenging. And unless there's a pretty big course correction pretty quickly, I don't see it improving. And I think also we have a time crunch, the way that the money was allocated. So right now, the state has basically reprioritized. They're on their fourth map that they've published. And they've basically said, okay, if you qualified for another CPUC, our regulators grant programs, in particular the FFA program, we're going to prioritize building fiber there, whether you need it or not. So that's been really challenging in that I'm working with a tribal group, a good friend of ours. They've got 20 tribes in San Diego County. The original design had basically 3 to 4 highways that were going to have a ring throughout San Diego. Because there are no FFA recipients in that region, they've completely removed about 250 miles of fiber. It's gone. On the flip side, we have a county in Northern California that was a BTOP recipient, already has an open access fiber network, and is being overbuilt. No one wants the fiber there. So it's just like, it makes absolutely no sense, where I think they took like the easy button of like, okay, yeah, if you did this program, then we're going to give you this. But again, not talking to the local community, not really doing good community outreach, or even listening. I know that's actually a rural power co-op begged the state and said, look, please don't overbuild us. We've already accepted BTOP. We've already accepted ARPA. We've already built this network. Please do not overbuild us. And they're doing that. So it's just really challenging. Again, if states replicate that model where they're not listening to the constituents that actually going to utilize this network, that would be really sad if that becomes the replicatable design for other states.
All right, we're about out of time. I wanted to give a chance for last comments on this, but I also wanted to remind people this is confusing. MMBI is state of California building this large middle mile network with multiple rings across California, being managed by Golden State Net, currently under contract. Will be rebid soon regarding for additional services. There is another thing that Kim had been helping to consult with in California, which chose the puzzlingly similar name, Golden State Connect Authority. And that's totally different. That's a bunch of counties that have an open access dream and are moving forward with it in ways that I'm also supportive of. And it kind of overlaps, but also don't be confused. That has nothing to do with anything we've really talked about. So with that, let me start with Doug, if you can keep it quick. Any last comments or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm wondering why Matt doesn't get in it on the bets.
I fully invited Matt to participate, and Matt was like, I don't know if I have to be there when you make a fool of yourself, Chris, and try to alienate half of your audience. So he made a
that's a good answer.
I'm already born and raised in California, so there's already kombucha jokes and EV jokes and everything else. So yeah, I stick away from that.
Travis?
Well, Matt, I commend you. It's difficult enough to build a network in the rest of the U.S., and you have chose the most challenging state to work in. So I Godspeed, my friend. I wish you luck there.
Yeah, I mean, he can't get enough. He's working with multiple networks in the state.
Yeah.
And then also, I mean, let's just before Kim, let me give it to you, and then I'm going to ask Matt a final closing question also. Kim?
No, I was just going to say kudos to what you're trying to do and continue to do. But I also understand why California's trying to do this. They might not be executing it correctly for a lot of people's opinions, but they're trying to do something. So at least they're trying to do something. So I've got to give them a lot of credit for that, because a lot of people are sitting back and hoping something will happen in their state. And California's taking it in their own hands. And as we know, in this country, we all don't agree on everything. So hopefully we can come to a consensus and make it work eventually.
Some of us don't agree with ourselves. Matt, did you want to respond quick to the Jared Hardy's comment? I don't understand what he's asking because it's more technical than I am today. Requiring interconnect would solve a lot of this. Overbuild would become redundancy when both paths are open to OSPF mesh routes.
Yeah, so that's a routing protocol. I think they're mixing two different terminologies there. I think the idea is that if networks were forced to interconnect at some level, then various routing protocols, contractual relationships, et cetera, could be used. So I think that the proposal there is if you're going to overbuild, you have to interconnect it at some level, so that it's not two island networks. That's what it sounds like. I could totally be wrong.
Okay. The last thing I want to ping you on then was, do you just want to take 1 minute to describe how you help the state of California deal with networking during fires?
Oh man, that's hard to do in 1 minute.
You can do 2 or 3. It's interesting.
Yeah. So basically, Starlink is not always the savior, and we tend to have pretty large fires in the state. We're trying to go, I think, for newer records. So 1 million acres is pretty normal, and at that size fire, you've got 5,000 firefighters. You've got a huge logistics organization, showers, commissary. It's a big operation, and a lot of those camps basically need a lot of connectivity, and oftentimes a lot of our connectivity happens to be aerial. I don't know why, really like aerial in the state, but conveniently when there's a fire, it burns down. And so we've actually seen situations where the most reliable internet in a fire-prone county typically is the county office of education, because they're a customer of scenic, and scenic typically will buy circuits from different providers for redundancy. So maybe Frontier on one side and Comcast on the other. So when that fire event does occur, the best internet is usually at schools. And so what we've done is taken some of that connectivity, shot it up to a mountaintop, and then back down to fairgrounds. Typically county fairgrounds are where the logistics camps occur for these events. And our forward-thinking model there is we have a lot of legacy fire lookouts, buildings on top of large mountaintops. If you built a ring between those lookouts, which conveniently have good line of sight, sometimes they have power. I've got a friend that's actually working to bring fiber up a mountaintop 5 miles in the same trench as the power company is in. If you interconnect the lookouts, you could then bring 2 or 3 sources of internet. And so when the next fire event occurs, you just aim your wireless up to the lookout, and boom, you're online with multiple paths to the internet. So that's the goal. But that's one of like 7 different side projects I have, and not my day job.
Well, I appreciate it. It's super interesting. We are going to wrap the show. I think we'll be back in about 2 weeks. I should be sleep deprived that day, Travis. I'll be coming back on a very early flight after our next tribal broadband boot camp outside, or right in the area around Spokane. So should be a good show. I'll try to hold off on lunch, so I'll be hungry and tired if you would prefer. I really appreciate all of you all. I appreciate the folks who are listening, especially the people who really hate my opinions. So come for everyone else's opinion and suffer through mine. It's been a fun episode. We look forward to doing a lot more of them. Thanks for tuning in to Connect This.